What's up, scholars? Welcome back to another video. Today we are going to be looking at Sanji versus Queen, just their fight from Wano. Sanji versus Queen was one of my favorite fights in Wano. I loved it so much because of what it represented, what it stood for Sanji, and just the fight itself was really cool. Queen is a good fighter. He gets very overconfident and very cocky at times in the fight. That goes to his detriment, but his fighting style and the fact that he's a cyborg and how his dinosaur powers kind of work with that is really cool and interesting. But the main reason I want to focus on this fight is obviously because of Sanji. Sanji has remained one of my favorite characters in One Piece, and in my top 3 Straw Hats from the very beginning, he's at the top. He's at the top. I love Sanji so much. He's my favorite. So seeing him fight, seeing this fight and everything that it stood for him, I was so pleased with it. So I'm just gonna go ahead and dive into it because we're just gonna kind of take a little bit of time to look at the fight and kind of what it symbolizes for Sanji, because there's a lot of symbolism in his fight with Queen, and I have watched this fight in the anime as well. So I've read it in the manga and I've watched it in the anime. I think the anime did really good with that symbolism to kind of add that layer of what this represented for Sanji. So with that being said, let's go ahead and talk about it. So Sanji ends up going off against Queen. Queen is one of the lead performers for Kaido. Queen and King kind of seem to be Kaido's 2 right-hand men, alongside with Jack. They're all these calamities that protect Kaido. But Queen and King seem to be the biggest threat of those calamities. They're like the 2 biggest threats. And Queen has a personal kind of vendetta, personal grudge against Sanji because he is a Vinsmoke, and because Queen used to, I think he used to work with Judge, or he has some sort of grudge against him because Queen is also an engineer and inventor, and he is a scientist, and Judge is a scientist and has invented all of these things. He's invented Germa, and Queen wants to fight Sanji to see if Judge's creations could beat his technology, could beat his own creations, because in Queen's mind, he is the better inventor, he is the better scientist. So of course Sanji coming along is this perfect opportunity for him to prove that he's the better one. I'm going to take a second here to talk about Queen. Queen, what is interesting about this dynamic is Queen has a lot of arrogance in his creations, in his technology, and while he is shown to be a very good scientist, by the way, he's able to recreate all of Germa's signature moves, like all of Sanji's brothers. He recreates all of their signature moves. But while he's able to do that, his arrogance plays into his downfall, because while he does have the tactics to be a great scientist, his pride gets in the way, and it actually slows him down and holds him back in these fights, because he's almost too overconfident in what he thinks is these great abilities, and it ends up biting him in the butt, because he's been so focused on proving that he's the better scientist that he's not actually working on anything. Like, he just has these recreations, he has these things that he has as a dinosaur, and they're really cool, but he's more bark than bite in this fight because of that overconfidence, because of that arrogance. And Sanji recognizes that eventually, after he gets over his own internal battle, and uses that arrogance to his favor in order to beat Queen. Because Sanji approaches this fight not as to prove that Queen is the better scientist or Judge is the better scientist. Sanji approaches this fight as I am the better fighter. I am the better person to win this fight. And that's what sets the 2 apart. That's what sets this fight apart, is the way Sanji's mindset is in when he approaches his fight with Queen versus Queen's mindset, because Queen is just, oh, I'm gonna prove I'm better, I'm gonna prove I'm a better scientist, while Sanji is literally fighting for his life over here, not just physically but mentally and emotionally as well. He is fighting a much bigger battle facing Queen than Queen is facing Sanji. And that difference in mindset is really what sets this fight apart from the others, because of the impact it has of, one, what happens if Sanji loses this fight? Two, what happens if Sanji wins this fight? There is an emotional impact either way for Sanji at this point, because one, he doesn't want to lose because he doesn't want to let Luffy down. He can't let Queen keep rampaging. And it won't be a satisfactory win for Queen either if Sanji were to lose, because Sanji didn't rely on the Germa suit. He didn't rely on Judge's technology, so Queen wouldn't have been able to come out of that victorious saying, yes, I'm the better scientist. So Sanji's loss would have been a loss for both of them in a sense in that manner, but Sanji pulling ahead and winning against Queen stands for so much more on a storytelling level and on a personal level too, which I really, really like. Because Sanji has so much higher stakes going into this fight because of the Germa awakening that he has as he's fighting against Queen, when his body is all twisted and mangled from being crushed by Queen, and then Queen's own kind of stupidity and arrogance gets in the way and frees him. Sanji has a very morphed body that is now awakened. He has the exoskeleton from Germa that was programmed into him essentially, and he fears from that moment that this awakening is meaning that he is going to become like them. So his Germa awakening actually incites a lot more fear and uncertainty in Sanji, because it makes him hesitant to fight because he doesn't want to continue awakening these powers. It makes him hesitant to speak to anybody, like when Chopper sees Sanji get hit over the head by Queen's sword and it snaps in half, and Sanji's just sitting there like, ow, and Chopper's like, oh my goodness, like, I've never seen anything like this, and Sanji turns to Chopper in horror almost and be like, wait, no, like that's not what I meant, I didn't mean for this to happen. He gets so panicked and apprehensive about the entire thing that he just feels like there's no other choice but to run. He doesn't want to fight at this point because of what this means to him. So he's just like, no, wait, give me a minute. Like he just wanted a minute to think. He's like, no, give me a second to think about this. Like, I need to process what is happening. Of course, Queen isn't gonna let that happen, because Queen, again, is so obsessed and hyper-focused on Sanji because of the name Vinsmoke that he just wants to fight Sanji no matter what. And as he's running away, Sanji ends up thinking that he has hurt this woman, Osome, who he sees in front of him injured, and she's looking at him with so much fear in her eyes, and Sanji can't remember what was happening because he was so lost in thought, so consumed by the idea of becoming like them. And then the next thing he knows, he sees this woman on the ground hurt right in front of him where he had been running, looking at him with terror in her eyes. And all he's left with is this despair and thinking, did I do this? No. And this part gets me every time. It made me super emotional when I read it, and it made me emotional again when I was watching it, because just the desperation in Sanji's voice as he's talking, being like, no, like, I can't have done this. I would have never done this, because one of the main things about Sanji is that he doesn't want to hurt a woman. He will not lay his hands on a woman. And we saw back on Whole Cake, whenever he was with his family and confronting them, they had no issue putting their hands on a woman, to the servant to show her her place, like to put her in place. They had no issue beating a woman unconscious. And Sanji here is just terrified that this awakening of Germa's powers means that he's losing his heart as well, that he's going to lose his heart and his mind to become a mindless monster that will only follow orders, that will have no real thoughts or emotions for themselves, and just become this killing machine. And he's so afraid of that. And when he tries to reach out to Osome and she runs from him, and he goes into that room where all the women are just there and they're terrified of him and they're yelling at him saying like, how dare you do this, how could you possibly do this to her, and him trying to be like, no way, I don't think I did this, I don't remember doing this, and them chasing him out of the room, him leaving, and then Queen showing back up, and then Sanji recalling how the situation had come to play, how he was running and wasn't really paying attention, and then boom, she was there injured and there was nobody else there. So he thought, it must have been me, I must be losing my mind and I'm becoming like Germa. And at this point, Queen is still like, Queen talks so much during this fight. That's one of his biggest downfalls. He's a talker, and his talking is so detrimental to his fight because it shows his overconfidence. It shows just his pride and arrogance in himself and in his ability. So he's sitting here taunting Sanji, begging Sanji to put on the raid suit to show him what Germa can do. And Sanji is over here having the biggest internal struggle with his morality, with his fear, and with his fate. This idea of fate that was brought up of, is he fated to become like Germa? Is he fated to still, even as much as he's run from it, as much as he's tried to stay away from it, as much as his mother sacrificed for him to be human, is it still not enough for him to escape the fate of being like Germa? And it's so heartbreaking to see him struggle with this, to think, is this what I'm going to end up being like no matter what I choose? And Sanji is a very self-sacrificial character. We have seen this literally from the beginning when we first meet Sanji. He's always been a very self-sacrificial character. We figure out why he is so self-sacrificial in Whole Cake, and that whole instance on Whole Cake is thoroughly analyzed to show why he is the way he is. And it's because his entire life he's been told he's a failure. He was locked up by his father. He was I'm gonna get emotional. He was abused and tortured by his family, save his sister, but even she was kind of a passive viewer because she didn't feel like she could really do anything. She ends up being the one to take him, to free him, because Judge disowned him, saying, well, I don't want anybody to know I have a failure of a son like you. Sanji ends up in Zeph's care, clinging to a dream of the All Blue, because that was literally his only shining light when he was trapped in that dungeon, when he was in that cage. And still, through all of that suffering, through all of that hurt, he turned into a nice and kind person when he could have easily turned out to be a horrid villain. And he had every reason to be, but he didn't. Turns into this nice, caring person who will never lay his hands on a woman. Why? Because there were only two people in his life who ever showed him kindness, and they were both women. It was his mom and his sister. The only people he had known to show him kindness were women, so of course he grows up with this idea to idolize women and to hold them in a higher regard, and of course he's never gonna hurt them. He has a father now. His father's name is Zeph. We discuss it in Whole Cake. And as Sanji grows up, and then of course he meets Luffy. He gets on Luffy's ship, and from that moment, getting on Luffy's ship, Sanji, of course, becomes a pirate, but he always prioritizes others instead of himself. While yes, he does get on Luffy's ship because Luffy wants him as a cook, and he wants to find the All Blue, he does it because Zeph and the other cooks are pushing him out intentionally, because they know you will never do this on your own, because you're so fixated on paying back a debt, on taking care of us, we're gonna make you go. Because he knew what they were trying to do, and he was like, okay, fine, I get it. Bring all this up to say, throughout that point, all the way through One Piece, he's been very self-sacrificial. If he thinks him sacrificing himself will benefit his crew, will benefit the ones he loves, he's never hesitated on doing it. Until now. He had his first moment when he called for help from Robin. That was the first moment he decided not to be a self-sacrifice. That was the first conscious moment he decided, I'm not going to be a sacrifice. He called for Robin's help. That was like the first sign, if you will. It's like, oh, okay, my boy's learned a little bit. He's changing a little bit. And then this moment when he's fighting Queen is the second one, and it's huge. It is a huge, monumental point for Sanji as he is struggling with himself. He is terrified, absolutely terrified and horrified of becoming anything like his family, of becoming anything like his brothers or his dad. He does not want to become like his family. And yet, for a moment, he thinks, what if this side of me is what helps Luffy the most? What if this side of me is what helps Luffy achieve his dream of being king of the pirates? I like how the anime put it in there when they showed this flashback from Whole Cake of Luffy shouting after Sanji that he can't be king of the pirates without him. And Luffy was calling out to the Sanji that didn't have the German powers. He was calling out to the Sanji he knew, the kind-hearted Sanji who had a weakness for women. That's the Sanji that Luffy needs to become king of the pirates. But Sanji was willing to give that up if the other side benefited him more. Until, and he has this conversation with himself, and I love this part so much because he's not choosing this solely for Luffy's sake. He's choosing it for himself. And he says, tell me, Luffy, which would you prefer? The regular flesh and blood me who turns into a helpless wreck whenever I face an opponent who's a woman, or a cruel, cold, emotionless warrior of science who can crush even monsters like him as long as you give me the order? Which one's going to be more useful to the king of the pirates? And as he's thinking this, and he says, I made up my mind, and he crushes the Germa suit, crushes it and destroys it right then and there. He makes his decision to not take that power, even if it would have benefited Luffy. Because one, he's finally made a choice for himself. He decided that that's not what he wants. That's not how he's gonna live his life. He's going to go against this idea of fate that he's gonna end up like them. He decides to go against it. He said, no, that's not who I am. That's not who I'm gonna be. And thinking of Luffy in that moment, because Luffy has always been this embodiment of freedom, embodiment of choosing what's best for you, wanting someone to be free. And should Sanji have chosen the Germa side over himself in that moment, Sanji would have always been a prisoner within himself. And Luffy would have hated that. Would Luffy have been able to use Sanji to be king of the pirates? Sure, I think he would have, but Luffy would have hated that Sanji caged himself in order to help Luffy. I love the representation there. I love this idea that Sanji, by destroying the Germa suit, is freeing himself from his own cage in his mind, instead of just solely thinking about what Luffy wants, what's better for him and his crew. He's deciding for himself, no, that's not what I want either. That's not who I want to be. And he's gonna fight against it as hard as he can. And I just love that visual representation of him smashing the Germa suit with his foot, the feet that he always fights with, and I love it so much. It's such a symbolization of him starting to break free. He's starting to break the bonds that Judge had put on him from a child. And I love in the anime, it made me so sad to see this, because this part definitely wasn't in the manga, and it made me really emotional when I saw it in the anime, when they had Sanji as an adult with the mask over his face, that caged little helmet thing that his brothers put on him, and it showed it breaking and cracking and him being free from that. Oh, that visualization was beautiful. Heartbreaking, but beautiful because of what it meant for Sanji. To see him finally break free from the trauma and the bonds of his past in this moment. And it gets shown even more after he does this and he's facing Queen, and Queen starts using all of Germa's different special moves that Sanji recognizes from his brothers, and he's fighting against Queen. It's like a symbolism of him fighting against his family. He gets to fight his family in essence when he's fighting Queen, because Queen decides to replicate these moves in front of Sanji. Because Sanji said, this is one fight I've got to end myself, like as Sanji, not as a Germa soldier. I got a little ahead of myself, but before Sanji does fight Queen, he's resolved in himself for many different reasons, and that's when he makes this call to Zoro. He makes this promise with Zoro. Zoro, in his fight with King, he's very preoccupied, and there's only so much he understands about why Sanji is asking this, but it does seem like Zoro does grasp the situation, that this is a very serious thing that Sanji is asking, but he doesn't necessarily act like it until the very end. When Sanji asks Zoro, if by the end of this I'm not in my right mind, I want you to kill me. Which it's gonna make me cry. It's sad for so many different reasons, because it's kind of a dual perspective here with Sanji in his decision, because one, it's one of the most selfish requests that he's ever made, because he would rather die than be like his family. And by asking Zoro to kill him, he's also, in a sense, almost ending Luffy's dream, because Luffy has said he can't be king of the pirates without Sanji. Sanji, knowing this, asks Zoro to kill him. So it's insane that this is one of the most selfish requests that Sanji has made, while at the same time being one of the most self-sacrificial requests that Sanji has made, because he does not want to put any of his crew through any part of what Germa is. He doesn't want to treat them that way. He doesn't want them to see him in that manner. He doesn't want a chance that he becomes a heartless monster around the people he loves the most in the world. So he would rather let himself die than them see that side of him. I mean, it hurts. It hurts so bad. But the resolve for him to do that, the resolve for him to say, no, this is what I'm deciding. If this happens, you need to do this, is insane. It just shows so much growth in Sanji, in that one promise and that one request of Zoro. And Zoro, of course, agrees to it, and when he does, he's like, I don't really know what brought this up. I don't really know what this means, but because we're making this promise, don't die before then. I think that's like the main part of Zoro's promise to Sanji in that moment that means most, because Zoro recognizes that something's not going right. Something is very, very wrong, but he has no idea what. He has no idea why Sanji's even asking him to do this. The two bicker so much that Zoro's just like, heck yeah, you're giving me a chance, okay. But Zoro also recognizes that, are you okay? Zoro recognizes something's not quite right. So by saying don't die before then is like the most inspirational thing he can say to Sanji at the time, of saying, you can't die before we get a chance to figure this thing out. It's so simple, but it's so massive at the same time, and I love it so much. But then yes, as Sanji is fighting against Queen is using all of his brother's techniques against him, and it is this representation of Sanji facing off against the people who hurt him in the past, the people who abused him in the past, and he's fighting back against that. And then, as Sanji's fighting, and he's holding his own to an extent, but he is very injured, he's taking some blows, and then Queen pulls out Stealth Black and tries to use Sanji's own moves against him, what Sanji could have been as Germa Stealth Black, the number 3, Stealth Black. He uses his own move against Sanji, and Sanji gets to fight against himself. Sanji gets to fight against the Germa version of himself, which is so freeing to him. And I just feel like it is, because he gets to fight against the version of himself that he hates the most. He gets to fight against the version of himself that he fears becoming the most, and he wins. And he wins. He beats the Germa version of what he could have been by being himself, by being just Sanji, Blackfoot Sanji, a pirate of the Straw Hat crew, a son of Zeph. That version of Sanji gets to beat what he feared becoming, and it makes me cry because the anime did it beautifully. The shot of Sanji like breaking free of everything, and then him near the ocean, and you get the beautiful background, and Zeph comes up beside him and is smiling like he's so proud of Sanji, and then Sanji looks out and he sees Luffy smiling, and all the crew are there. They're there to welcome him, and he runs off to them. I'm sorry, that is beautiful symbolism. It is gorgeous, and I'm gonna cry just thinking about it. And it's through this fight that Sanji seems to be able to overcome the trauma of being Judge's son. He gets to break free of this idea of him just being a Vinsmoke, just being this product of science, just being a failure. And he gets to break free of all of that in this fight. And I love, first of all, it's really cool. The actual fight itself is really cool when Queen does decide to use Stealth Black against Sanji. Sanji moves faster than that, and he's moving faster. What Queen says, he's moving so fast that he's become invisible, which is insane to think about. Like, Sanji is moving at a ridiculous pace to move that fast. Like, that's insane, crazy. And as he's fighting, he's able to use what he gained from Germa, the exoskeleton. Oh, what does he say? He uses the exoskeleton, the muscle, and the speed, which increase his strength, and combining it with his haki, he is able to create blue flames, like hotter flames than what he had. And he called it Ifrit Jambe, which is so cool. And in that moment, he also has a moment of clarity when he realizes Queen with the Stealth Black was the one who hurt Osome. It wasn't Sanji. So again, just all this relief and clarification coming to Sanji, saying, I haven't lost my mind, I haven't lost my heart, I haven't hurt those I said I would never hurt. It was him. He has been making me think all of these things of myself because of the fight. And so Sanji, of course, he's just like, I can't stand those who would lay a hand on a woman. So he has an even bigger grudge against Queen because of that, and of everything else that's been going on in this fight. And with that, he lays this torrent of attack on Queen and ends up beating Queen. Oh, he beats him so bad. It was so satisfying. He ends up sending Queen off Onigashima and end up plummeting down to Earth, which is insane. I don't know if Queen landed on land or in the ocean. I'm not sure, but Queen's gone. He sent him flying. And I love that after this, because he protected Osame and he has this clarity that he didn't hurt her, he can approach her more freely, he can approach her with more care and be relaxed, knowing that he didn't harm her. And he gets little Chuji, the little mouse, and it's so cute because, again, that's a tie to his past. because he was the one who had taken care of the mice when he was a little kid. He used to feed them, and he was bullied for it and scorned for doing such a thing because how dare he be human. And then seeing this woman taking care of this little mouse, it just, the full circle moment for Sanji as he smiles seeing her reunited with her little pet, and it's so adorable. And then he gets to look at her and ask if she's okay. And of course, the relief of just everything, and then knowing that he's beat Queen, the relief of everything, knowing that he didn't harm Osame, just comes crashing down on him, as well as all of his other physical injuries, and he just passes out. He's done. Sanji wins the battle against Queen because he put up a great fight against Queen. Queen was doing some serious damage to Sanji too, but again, like I stated earlier, Queen's arrogance was his major downfall, and then Sanji being able to see through that, to see through the confusion and the desperation and the fear of what Germa's awakening will do to him, he is able to beat Queen. I just love it. It's a very symbolic fight. It is a very emotional fight for Sanji because of what it means, what it represents for him. I think the anime handled it beautifully. Those added scenes that we got were just chef's kiss. They were beautiful, beautiful, beautiful extra scenes. I love it so much, and seeing Sanji being able to overcome his past in this manner is so rewarding to me. It really is. I love seeing this for Sanji. It is a great fight. It's one of his best fights. I'm not sure if it's like his best fight of all time yet. I've got to look at some of his older fights to kind of see that. But if not one of his best, his best. This was an amazing fight because of everything that it stood for him and what he accomplished in this fight. Because yes, he overcame himself, but he also defeated one of the lead performers, one of the three guarding Kaido. That's a huge deal. That was a huge deal to take Queen down, and he did it, and I'm so proud of him. I love my boy Sanji. This is such a great fight for him. But that pretty much concludes this video. I just wanted to take some time to talk about this fight, everything that it means, because oh my goodness, the impact of this fight, what it meant for the plot for the rest of Wano, and how things played out at the end with Queen being out of the picture, and also what it means going forward storytelling wise and character wise for Sanji. I'm so excited. I'm so excited to see where it goes from here. But thank you all so much for watching this video. Tell me what your thoughts are on the whole Sanji versus Queen fight. If I missed something big, let me know. I know I didn't cover all the details of like the fight, like all the different moves that they pulled, but I just wanted to talk about like the importance and the symbolism behind the fight. The fight itself was really cool. I liked how they did it in the manga. I liked how they did it in the anime. 10 out of 10 fight. I enjoyed it. I'm also a little biased because it's Sanji, so there's that too. But let me know what y'all thought of the fight. Let me know what y'all thought of this video. If you want to see more videos like this from me where I just analyze certain moments from One Piece, I would be totally down to doing that. Other than that, thank you all so much for watching. Be on the lookout. I am doing my One Piece review on Thursday. We're going to be covering around 10 chapters after Wano leading up to Egghead, so be on the lookout for that. There is a lot happening with that. Wow, it's a lot. But that's all for this video, and I will see you next time, scholars. Bye!